The applause started before I even stepped fully into the living room. It rolled toward me in waves, sharp and confident, the kind meant for someone who belonged at the center of things. My sister Allison stood near the fireplace, smiling as if she had practiced that exact expression in the mirror. My father's voice rose above the clapping. "That's my daughter," Victor Monroe said proudly. Hard work finally paying off. I stopped just inside the doorway, my coat still on, my hands empty. No one noticed. Before I go any further, let me say this clearly. The entire content of the video is a fictional work created by the writing team of the Family Afterlight channel, intended to reflect common conflicts in families and society, helping viewers recognize their emotions and choose a more positive way of living. "Lydia, you made it," my mother Janice said, already turning away. Her words landed, then vanished, like a courtesy nod. A woman I barely recognized leaned toward me. "You must be so proud of your sister." "I am," I said, because that was easier than explaining the rest. Allison laughed softly when someone asked about her job. "It's been intense," she said, "but I'm finally where I'm supposed to be." Dad jumped in before anyone else could. We all sacrificed for this. Family does that. His eyes swept the room, careful not to stop on me. Another guest clinked a glass. "You raised her right." "Victor," he smiled wider. "We did." I shifted closer, just enough to be within reach of the conversation. Dad's smile thinned. "Lydia works with computers," he added quickly, as if correcting an oversight. "Very stable, very practical." The word practical hung there, dull and flat. I met Allison's eyes for a moment. She looked past me. "Dinner in 10. My mother announced. "Let's not crowd Allison." As if I ever did. I took a glass from the counter and stood where no one would have to step around me. I listened to my father tell the same story again, each time polishing it smoother, each time removing pieces that didn't fit. If this sounds familiar already, stay with me. Sometimes the quiet parts of a family tell you more than the loud ones ever will. I learned early how to listen without being seen. It was a skill that made family gatherings easier and dinners shorter. After the applause faded, my father drifted from group to group, repeating Allison's story like it belonged to him. Each version grew smoother, more impressive. When he spoke about her, his shoulders straightened. When he spoke about me, his voice flattened. "Lydia works with compliance," he told a man near the bookshelf, very behind the scenes. The man nodded politely. "Important work." Dad smiled, but it never reached his eyes. "Someone has to do it." I took a step closer. "I'm with a federal defense contractor," I said evenly. "Cybersecurity compliance." Dad didn't look at me. "Yes, that." The conversation moved on. At the kitchen counter, my mother adjusted a serving tray. "You look tired," she said, not unkindly. "I had a long week." She nodded. "Well, tonight is about your sister. Try to relax. I am relaxed." She gave a tight smile. "Good." Allison joined us, her voice light. "Mom, they're asking if I'll be moving closer to the city?" "That would be wonderful," my mother said immediately. Allison glanced at me. "Lydia's already there?" "She likes it." "I like the work," I corrected. Dad appeared behind her. "See, everything works out." It always sounded like a conclusion, even when nothing had been resolved. I watched them move together, a unit that closed ranks without effort. I stayed where I was, close enough to hear, far enough to be excluded. A neighbor leaned over to me. "Your parents must be proud. 2 successful daughters." I smiled. "They are?" That was not a lie. It just was not the whole truth. What no one mentioned was that I had been sending money home since my first year in Arlington. $700 here, $800 there, sometimes more. When my mother called with her careful voice and said things were tight, "It's temporary," she always said, We're just holding it for you. I never saw it again. But I never asked. What no one mentioned was how often I was asked to wait, to understand, to be patient. How often my needs were labeled inconvenient and postponed. Later, as I set my empty glass down, my father's voice rose again. Family is about knowing your place, he said, smiling at the room. I felt that line settle somewhere deep, not sharp enough to hurt yet, but heavy enough to stay. I stayed quiet. I always did. But if you've ever sat in a room where your life is being summarized without you, you know this feeling. You know how silence can start to sound like agreement. My father didn't raise his voice when he asked me to step aside. He never did. He simply touched my elbow and said my name like it was already decided. Lydia, a word. We stopped near the hallway, close enough for others to hear if they tried, far enough for him to pretend it was private. You've been quiet tonight, he said. I usually am. He smiled without warmth. That's not what I meant. He glanced back toward the living room, where Allison was laughing with a group of guests. She's doing well. This transition matters. I know. He lowered his voice. Your mother and I have been talking. That phrase always meant the same thing. A conclusion had already been reached. My role was to comply. You remember the money, he continued. What you've been sending? Yes. We've been holding it for you, he said smoothly, like we agreed. My stomach tightened, but my voice stayed steady. You said it was temporary. And it was, he replied, until now. He paused, waiting for that to land. I didn't move. Allison needs to make the right impression, he said. She's meeting people who expect a certain level of stability, a reliable car, the right image. I met his eyes. That's not my responsibility. His smile faded. Excuse me, I'm not contributing anymore, I said. I have plans for my money. He straightened. Family steps up. I have stepped up. I said, for years. He exhaled sharply. You're being difficult. No, I said. I'm being clear. For a moment. He said nothing. Then his tone shifted, sharp and controlled. You wouldn't have what you have without this family. I didn't argue. That's not true. He laughed once, quietly. You sit behind screens. You call it service. Don't confuse comfort with contribution. The words stung, but they didn't surprise me. I'm still saying no, I said. That was when he leaned closer. You've always taken more than you give, he said. Truthfully, we'd all be better off if you'd never existed. The hallway went still. I could hear the murmur of conversation from the other room, the clink of glasses, the life going on without me. My mother stood a few steps away, her hands folded. She didn't speak. Allison stared at the floor. I felt something inside me settle. Not anger, not shock, clarity. I smiled, small and precise. Then consider me gone. My father's eyes widened, just slightly. I stepped back. I didn't wait for permission. I didn't wait for anyone to stop me. I walked past the applause, past the story they were telling, past the place I had been assigned. No one followed. The door closed behind me with a soft click, and for the first time that night, the silence felt like my own. I sat in my car for a long time before starting the engine. My hands rested on the steering wheel, steady in a way that felt unfamiliar. I wasn't replaying his words. I was replaying patterns. 6 years earlier, my mother had called me after dinner one night, her voice soft and careful. Things are a little tight, she said. Just for now. How much do you need? I asked. She hesitated. Whatever you're comfortable with. I sent $700 that month, the next month. $800. Sometimes more when she said Allison had unexpected expenses, or when Dad's tone grew short in the background. It's temporary, she always said. We're holding it for you. I believed her. Or maybe I wanted to. At first, Dad thanked me. "You're dependable," he said once. "That matters." Dependable became expected. Expected became invisible. When I moved to Arlington for work, my father called to give advice I didn't ask for. "Don't get too comfortable," he said. "That kind of job can disappear. It's stable." I told him. "It's compliance." "Exactly," he replied. "No one notices compliance until something goes wrong." I heard the message underneath. If no one noticed my work, no one would notice me. Every year, the number added up quietly. 700 here, 800 there. Over 6 years, it became tens of thousands of dollars I never tracked because I trusted my mother when she said it was safer with them. Family money, Dad called it once, smiling like it was a compliment. At Thanksgiving 2 years ago, an aunt asked me how my job was going. Before I could answer, Dad said, "She's comfortable." That's what matters. Comfortable. Not capable, not accomplished, comfortable. After Allison failed an exam, my mother called in tears. She's so discouraged. She said, "This is hard for all of us. I can help," I said, already opening my banking app. "You're a good sister," she replied. No one ever asked if I was tired. When I finally started questioning it, I brought it up gently. "I'd like to see what's been saved," I said to my mother on the phone. There was a pause. Why now I'm thinking about the future? Another pause. "We'll talk later." We never did. Sitting there in the dark, I realized something I had been avoiding. I hadn't been included in decisions because I wasn't meant to be. My role was to stabilize, not to belong. I wasn't a daughter in their story. I was a solution they reached for when things felt unsteady. My phone buzzed. My mother's name lit the screen. I didn't answer. A message followed. "Let's not make tonight worse than it already is." Worse for who? Then my father's name appeared. I watched it ring until it stopped. For years, I had confused endurance with love. I had told myself that staying quiet made me mature, that giving without question made me necessary. But necessary wasn't the same as valued, and valued people weren't erased the moment they said no. I started the car and pulled away from the house, not because I was angry, but because I finally understood the math. I had been paying to remain acceptable. And the moment I stopped, the equation solved itself. I blocked their numbers the next morning. Not dramatically. I simply woke up, looked at my phone, and realized I didn't have the energy to explain myself again. For a few days, the quiet held. At work, things felt normal until they didn't. My manager, Claire Benton, asked me to stop by her office late one afternoon. She didn't close the door all the way, which was how I knew something was off. "Everything okay?" she asked, carefully. "Yes," I said. "Why?" She folded her hands. "We received a message, not a complaint, a concern." My chest tightened, but my voice stayed even. "From who? A family member." She said, "Your father." I let the silence stretch. She watched me, waiting. "He said he was worried." She continued, "About stress, about your well-being." "And what did he say exactly?" I asked. "That you'd been behaving unpredictably," she replied. He framed it as concern. I nodded once. "Did he give examples?" "No," she said, "which is why I wanted to hear from you." I exhaled slowly. There's nothing to explain. I cut off contact. Claire's expression shifted. This isn't disciplinary. But when something like this comes in, it has to be noted, not investigated, not challenged, not dismissed. Noted. "Thank you for telling me," I said. She hesitated. "If this escalates, we'll need documentation." I understood what she wasn't saying. Silence was no longer neutral. That evening, a voicemail came through from an unknown number. I didn't answer. The message was my mother's voice, strained and tight. "Your father was only trying to help." She said, "You didn't have to make things so extreme." Extreme. That word again. The next morning, another email arrived, this time from a generic address connected to human resources. "Please confirm there are no external circumstances impacting your professional reliability." I stared at the screen until the words stopped blurring. At lunch, a coworker I barely knew said, "Hey, hope everything's all right. Families can be complicated." I smiled. They can be. The message had traveled without me. That night, my cousin Ryan called. He rarely called. "He's telling people you're unstable," Ryan said quietly. Not loudly, just enough. I closed my eyes. "At work too, I think so." He replied, "He's careful. He knows how to sound concerned." After we hung up, I sat at my kitchen table and let the truth settle. I had believed silence would protect me because it always had before. It had kept arguments short. It had kept peace, or something like it. But this was different. Silence wasn't being respected. It was being filled in. I opened my laptop and searched for legal counsel. Not out of anger. Out of necessity. If I did nothing, the story would continue without me. And this time, it wouldn't just cost me a place in my family, it would cost me my name. The attorney's office was quiet in a way that felt intentional, not comforting. Controlled. Her name was Melissa Grant, introduced by a colleague who didn't ask questions when I said I needed discretion. She didn't start with sympathy. She started with facts. "Your father contacted your employer," she said, scanning the notes I'd sent ahead. "Not directly accusatory. That's important. So nothing illegal." I said, "Not yet," she replied, "but not harmless." I folded my hands. "What are my options?" She leaned back. "You can ignore it. Hope it fades. And if it doesn't, then it becomes a pattern without a record." She said, "Which works against you." I nodded. "The other option. We document," she said, formally. "That includes a cease and desist letter. Calm. Factual. No accusations. And my family." Her gaze didn't waver. "They will not like it." I assumed that. She paused. "Once this is sent, there's no pretending nothing happened. No walking it back." I thought of my mother's voice telling me not to make things worse, of my father's careful concern, of the note in my file at work that would never quite disappear. "Will this hurt my job?" I asked. "It protects it," she said. "At the cost of family access." I laughed quietly. That access has already been revoked. I just hadn't acknowledged it. Melissa slid a draft across the table. It was brief. Names. Dates. A request for all contact to stop. No emotion. No explanation. "This isn't punishment," she said. "It's a boundary." I read it twice. My name looked different on legal paper. More solid. "I want to proceed," I said. She nodded once. "I'll send it through civilian channels. Certified." When I got home, my phone was lit up with missed calls. My mother. My father. A text from Allison that read, "Can we talk?" I didn't respond. The next day, my manager called me in again. This time, the door closed. I received documentation. Claire said, "From your counsel." "Yes." I said. She read my face for a moment. "Thank you for handling this appropriately." Appropriately. The word surprised me. "There will be no further action unless something changes." She continued, "If anyone contacts us again, it will be addressed." I left her office lighter than I expected. That evening, my father's email arrived. Subject line, "This has gone too far." I didn't open it. Another followed from my mother. "We never meant to hurt you." I closed my laptop. For years, I had tried to solve problems by being reasonable, by absorbing discomfort, by explaining myself until my voice disappeared. I had believed that if I stayed calm enough, patient enough, the people who loved me would eventually see me. The letter wasn't about making them see me. It was about accepting that they never had, and choosing to stop waiting. Ryan called me late, his voice low like he didn't trust the walls. I didn't mean to hear it, he said. But once I did, I couldn't pretend I hadn't. I didn't ask what he meant. I waited. They were talking about you. He continued. Your parents. Allison was there too. I closed my eyes. Talking how? Like you weren't a person, he said. Like a problem they'd managed badly. There was a pause. Then the sound of him breathing in. I recorded it. He said, I don't know why. Maybe because I knew you'd need it. I didn't thank him right away. Send it. The file arrived a minute later. I sat at my desk and pressed play. My father's voice came through first, steady and irritated. She always made things harder than they needed to be. My mother sighed. If she had just kept helping, none of this would have happened. And now she's acting like a victim, Allison said. After everything we did for her. My father laughed. She was useful because she didn't ask questions. That was the deal. I stopped the recording before it finished. Ryan called back immediately. You don't have to listen to the rest. I already have. I said, for years. I forwarded the file to my attorney. I didn't add commentary. I didn't need to. A week later, Allison called. I almost didn't recognize the number. I think something's wrong, she said quickly. My contract didn't renew. I'm sorry. I said. They said there were inconsistencies, she continued, that my experience wasn't what they thought. I stayed quiet. They asked where I got some of my references. She added, Dad told me to list the firm he consults with. That wasn't true. I said, I know, she whispered. Her voice cracked. Did you do this? No. I said, I stopped doing something. There's a difference. She didn't respond. Later that day, my mother emailed me. The subject line was we are being punished. She wrote about embarrassment, about gossip, about how people were asking questions. Not once did she mention the recording. Not once did she mention the money. My father's message came next. Longer, angrier. You've damaged this family beyond repair. You should be ashamed. I forwarded it to my attorney and archived it. At work, Claire stopped me in the hallway. I wanted you to know, she said. The matter is considered closed. Thank you, I replied. She hesitated. I'm sorry it came to this. So am I said, and meant it differently than she did. That night. Ryan texted again. They're not saying your name anymore. Just yours when they think it explains things. I set my phone face down. For the first time, I wasn't managing the fallout. I wasn't smoothing edges or filling gaps. I wasn't rewriting myself to fit their version of events. The truth had moved on without asking me for permission, and without me having to carry it. Allison's message arrived first, not a call. A text, carefully measured. I'm sorry. I didn't see it before. I see it now. I read it twice before replying. I believe you. That doesn't change anything. 3 dots appeared, disappeared, appeared again. I never meant to hurt you, she wrote. We were all under pressure. I set the phone down. Pressure had never been the problem. Permission had. My mother's email came that night. It was long and structured, the way she organized everything when emotions felt unsafe. We were trying to keep the family together. She wrote, Your father was afraid of losing control. Allison needed support. You've always been strong. Strong. The word she used when she didn't want to say convenient. I replied with one sentence. I needed parents, not management. Her response came hours later. We did our best. I didn't answer. My father waited until the next morning. His message was blunt, stripped of pretense. You embarrassed us. You could have handled this privately. I typed slowly. I tried. For years. That was the last message I sent him. A week passed, then another. The house stayed quiet in a way that felt earned, not fragile. Ryan stopped by one evening, bringing coffee like he always did when he didn't know what else to bring. "They're asking about you," he said. "If you'll come around eventually." I shrugged. "I'm not planning my life around their comfort." He nodded. "That sounds like you now, at work. Nothing changed, and that was the point. My name wasn't whispered. My file wasn't flagged. The silence held. One afternoon, my mother left a voicemail I didn't play. The transcript was enough. 'We miss you.'" "This isn't how families end." I deleted it. "Some endings don't look like explosions. They look like doors closing without being slammed. They look like conversations that no longer happen. I wasn't punishing them. I wasn't teaching a lesson. I was declining a role I had never agreed to play. And for the first time, no one argued with me about it." Peter stood in the doorway while I folded the last stack of invitations. "There weren't many. We had kept the list small on purpose." "Your parents still don't know," he said carefully. "I know," I replied. He watched me for a moment. "Do you want them to?" I slid the envelopes into a drawer and closed it. No, that was all it took. No argument, no persuasion. He stepped closer and rested his hand on the counter. Not to claim space, just to be present. On the morning of the wedding, my phone buzzed while I was getting dressed. One missed call, then another. The name on the screen didn't surprise me. I turned the phone face down. Peter noticed. "Everything okay?" "Yes," I said. And this time, it was true. "At the courthouse," the clerk smiled as she checked our paperwork. "Witnesses to," Peter said. Ryan raised his hand slightly. "Right here." When the clerk looked at me, I nodded. No hesitation. No scanning the room for approval that wasn't coming. Afterward, as we stood outside with coffee in our hands, Ryan hesitated. "They're going to hear about this." "I know," I said. "And you're okay with that. I didn't build this to be explained." I replied. "I built it to be lived." Later that evening, my mother's email came through. Someone must have told her, "I hope one day you'll understand why we did what we did." I didn't respond. Peter sat beside me on the couch. "You don't owe them closure." "I know." I said. I gave myself that. We talked about small things after that. Where we'd go next year, whether we'd repaint the kitchen, ordinary plans that didn't require permission. Before bed, I placed my phone in the drawer again. Not because I was afraid of what it might bring, but because I no longer needed it to be available to everyone. If you're listening to this and something in it feels uncomfortably familiar, I hope you stay with that feeling for a moment, not to relive it, but to recognize it. Some stories don't end with reconciliation. They end with clarity. I didn't lose my family that year. I stopped losing myself. And the quiet that followed wasn't empty. It was finally mine.